Hey, so glad you're here. Today, we are digging into a biblical puzzle that has seriously stumped people for ages. It's all about a divine promise that, if you just look at the surface, looks like it was completely and totally broken. We're going to unravel a story of cosmic conflict, lost peoples, and a redemption plan so surprising, it kind of reframes, well, everything. All right, let's dive in.
So it all boils down to this. The Old Testament is just packed with these amazing prophecies that God will one day regather and restore the nation of Israel. But, if you look at actual history, it seems like the exact opposite happened, right? They were conquered, scattered across the earth, and a huge chunk of them just vanished. So what gives? Did God just break his promise?
You know, the Apostle Paul actually wrestles with this very same problem in his letter to the Romans. He flat out asks, has God cast off his people? And then he drops this really cryptic clue. He connects Israel's story to the reconciliation of the entire world, and this wild phrase, life from the dead. To solve this mystery, we've got to follow the clues that he leaves for us.
Okay, so our first clue means we have to get super specific about who we're talking about when we say the word Israel. Because as it turns out, the Bible talks about two different groups here, and understanding that distinction, well, that's the first key to unlocking this whole thing. So here's the quick history lesson. After King Solomon, the whole nation just split in two. You had the southern kingdom, which was called Judah, and the northern kingdom, which kept the name Israel. Now, both were eventually conquered, but here's the absolutely crucial difference. While a little remnant of Judah eventually came back from Babylon, the 10 northern tribes that were scattered by Assyria, they never came back. They were just lost to history.
And this leads us to a super important point about words. The word Jew comes from the southern kingdom Judah. Simple enough. But the term Israelite, that refers to anyone from any of the original 12 tribes, including those from the lost northern tribes. So you get this key takeaway. All Jews are Israelites, but not all Israelites are Jews. Remember that. Those scattered people from the north were Israelites, but they weren't Jews.
So what happened to those scattered Israelites? Well, over generations, they just blended in. They intermarried, they melted into the cultures where they were exiled, they lost their language, their customs, their entire identity. As the prophet Hosea put it, God declared they were not my people. For all intents and purposes, they were gone.
All right, let's pivot to our second clue. Because to really get Israel's story, you have to zoom out and understand the Bible's story for all the other nations. And believe it or not, that story kicks off with a very famous tower.
Now, this is where our investigation takes a really surprising turn. The idea here is that the story of the Tower of Babel wasn't just about God confusing languages. It was this moment of cosmic reorganization. In this view, God divided up humanity, and as a judgment, he placed these new nations under the authority of lesser spiritual beings. He essentially disinherited them, setting up a world of divided loyalties, both on earth and in the heavens.
Now keep that story in your head, and just look at this number, 70. Seems pretty random, right? But in the biblical story, it is unbelievably important.
So, why 70? Well, if you look at Genesis 10, the chapter right before the Babel story, it lists exactly 70 nations. And this makes what Jesus does later absolutely breathtaking. When he sends out 70 disciples on a mission, it's a direct, symbolic message. He is signaling his plan to reclaim every single one of those nations that were put under other authorities way back at Babel. So now we've got these two parallel stories running, right? The 10 lost tribes of Israel who have just melted into the nations, and the 70 divided nations that are under the authority of these hostile spiritual powers. And the absolute genius of God's plan is that Jesus' mission is designed to solve both problems at the exact same time. You see, this whole setup created this massive cosmic showdown. These spiritual rulers of this world, they saw Jesus as a direct threat to their turf. They knew he was here to reclaim the nations and undo what happened at Babel. So their plan was pretty simple. Just kill him. But what they didn't realize, as Paul says, is that in killing him, they were actually springing the trap that God had set for them all along.
Okay, let's circle back to our original problem. The prophets promised that God would one day save all Israel. But we have to remember, that phrase means all 12 tribes. The southern Jews, yeah, but also the 10 northern tribes who were lost, scattered, and assimilated. So how in the world could that promise ever be fulfilled?
And this, right here, is where the two storylines, the lost tribes and the divided nations, dramatically collide. The way God fulfills his promise to Israel is maybe the most unexpected plot twist in the entire Bible.
I mean, let's just be honest about the problem. How do you gather a people who, after centuries, don't even know who they are anymore? They look like, talk like, and live just like the nations they were scattered into. It seems like a totally impossible task.
The key to the whole thing is hidden in a single, really unique phrase from way back in the book of Genesis. It's a phrase that almost never shows up anywhere else. When Jacob is blessing his grandson Ephraim, who would go on to be the leader of the northern kingdom, he gives this bizarre prophecy. He says Ephraim's descendants will become the fullness of the nations.
And here it is, the grand reveal. Let's just walk through this. Step 1. A prophecy is made that the leader of the northern tribes will literally become the fullness of the nations. Step 2. That exact group of people is then scattered and becomes completely indistinguishable from those very nations. So step 3, the solution is just breathtakingly elegant. How does God regather the lost tribes of Israel? By calling people out from among the nations. This is the stunning conclusion that Paul comes to. The mission to the Gentiles, to the non-Jews, it's not plan B because the Jews rejected Jesus. No, this was the original hidden plan all along, to fulfill the promise to regather the lost northern tribes. Bringing Gentiles into the family of God is the way all Israel gets restored.
I mean, just think about the beautiful irony of that for a second. Israel was originally supposed to be a light to the nations. They failed at that mission. So God used their very failure and their scattering to accomplish that mission in a way no one could have ever seen coming. By redeeming them from the nations, he makes them the light he always wanted them to be.
This table really pulls it all together. The prophecy to gather Israel, fulfilled by bringing in the nations. The prophecy for them to be a light, fulfilled through their rescue out of the nations. And remember that phrase from Paul, life from the dead? It's a metaphor. The northern tribes died when they assimilated and lost their identity. So their restoration is their resurrection.
So you can see why, after laying all of this out, Paul just erupts in praise. He realizes that God was weaving together every single thread, Israel's successes, their failures, their scattering, into this incredible tapestry of redemption that was so much grander and more intricate than anyone could have ever guessed.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought to chew on. This whole story suggests that what looks like failure and what looks like tragedy from our limited point of view might just be the necessary setup for a solution that solves more problems, redeems more people, and reveals a wisdom that is truly, as Paul says, unfathomable.